Hello everybody, I'm John Stinson, owner and director of the Recording Conservatory of Austin. Tonight is one of our open houses, and our guest speaker tonight is Matt Parmenter. He's a great engineer, producer, and I guess songwriter too, right? Yeah,
sometimes.
Yeah, some. Okay, without further ado, Matt, come on up. All right.
Hey everybody. I thought that what I would talk about today was mainly getting it right on the way in. One of the things that I feel like I spent probably 15 years doing wrong was trying to record people and make sure that when I was done working with them that I could go back in and fix everything that we'd recorded so that it would sound acceptable to me. And you know, it's really just completely the wrong approach. It's fixing it in the mix. It's post-production. It's miserable, thankless work that doesn't do it. You know, you still don't get the results most of the time. So yeah, I've really been focusing myself on making sure that when I'm tracking, what I hear is what I want to hear in the mix. And so I brought a couple of examples of that. One of them, I'm actually going to close this one. One of those examples is Emily Wolfe, who was just playing on before this whole thing started, and who has performed her song "The Slider," or her cover of the T-Rex song "The Slider" here.
Yeah, it's on
live
on our YouTube.
Yeah.
Hey Matt, do you mind give us a little introduction about yourself too?
Yeah.
I mean, like just before we dive into it, I mean, it would be great to hear a little bit about you for a second.
This is my process when I'm running a session. All right, we're all here. Let's go.
Yeah.
There's no introductions. Just go. I am a bass player, keyboard player, recording engineer. I've been playing piano since I was 4. Started recording as an interest when I was about 13, 14 years old, and just kept going with it. I went to school in East Lansing, or in Lansing, Michigan, at Lansing Community College, and they had a tiny little program, at the time it was a 4-track reel-to-reel and TAC Scorpion 16-channel console, which was kind of cool. And then moved to Chicago, tried to do industrial music there with all my friends that were into industrial music, and sort of had a moderate success, but not a lot. And then moved to Cincinnati, and that's where I really started the studio in an old ice cream factory, which is why I named my studio Ice Cream Factory Studio, which is what it still is today. No longer in an ice cream factory, unfortunately. I would have loved to have been able to move that whole warehouse up here with me, or down here with me. But yeah, it's big. So I moved here in 2008 to Austin, and set up shop in a house at first, and then found a commercial space about 10 years ago. And mainly have been working with artists through word of mouth, friends of friends. One person tells another person that I'm kind of good at what I do, and they pass it along, and it keeps me real busy. When I moved here, I'd been recording exclusively for a couple of years and had really decided that I wanted to get back on stage. So when I first moved here, I joined like 4 bands, and Quiet Company was the band that stuck, and I played bass with them for about 7 years. And I got to tour all over the US, Canada, all over Central Europe, and I don't know, I had a lot of fun with that. And then it was time to be done. I was getting older and focusing more on the studio. So I came back and kind of like really at that point, which was about 7 years ago, kind of made it known to all of my friends and acquaintances and other people that I'd played with that I was in town, I was available, and let's do a recording. And it pretty much I don't know, I feel like there were a few months where I was sort of like getting going, and then I'd already kind of laid the groundwork through playing and making all these relationships. So it didn't take me very long at all to get to the point where I was able to pay rent on the commercial space and, still have enough money left over to eat and pay rent at a home. So, so yeah, that's kind of the path. As far as what I've been doing for the last 20 years, musically, a lot of indie rock, a lot of pop, a lot of instrumental folk. Since I moved to Austin, a lot of this weird version of country that doesn't have a whole lot to do with Nashville. That's actually like thoughtful and made by thoughtful people. So yeah, like good. I'd call it more like Americana folk or something like that. It's got country elements, but it's definitely a little deeper. Just finding that this is a city full of absolutely stunning musicians, and they're, like I get excited every time I get to work with somebody who's like, I'm like, how did I get to have like the drummer for John Mayer and Tedeschi Trucks and Gary Clark in my studio, all these other guys that like played with people like Little Richard and Billy Preston and like, just absolute, Robert Plant and Robert Palmer and King Crimson, like all these. It's mostly drummers, oddly enough, but all these absolutely phenomenal world-class musicians with huge careers that are coming into my little studio, which is, it's kind of goofy, honestly. It's a great space, but it's in a business park, It's just a shotgun of a room, and it's cozy. It sounds great. It's crammed full of excellent gear, but yeah, I feel like one of the luckiest people on earth to be able to work with, all these stunning musicians on some really cool music, and it all just kind of happened because I'm sticking with it.
Yeah, cool, man.
So yeah, that's kind of me, Michigan kid who decided to move into an oven.
And it's hot here too.
Yeah, I just got back from the nice cool weather and kind of want to just turn right back around. But yeah, no, I love it here. It's treated me really well, and looking forward to a bunch more good recordings and trying to find new and interesting ways to stick genres together and trying to collect every microphone.
Yeah,
that's I've been on. That's the other thing I've been on fire with is just amassing an enormous collection of weird, rare, mainly ribbons, but a lot of other oddball mics, and it's going well. Yeah. I've got more than I can use, so don't get hung up in the gear, or you'll never make any money. Yeah. That's the.
Yeah, and you can come back to that too, but you're doing a series too, right? Like, what's it called?
The Polaroid Collective series?
No, I thought it was the mic. You said Wednesday mics or Friday mics.
Yeah, no, I've been doing Microphone Mondays on Instagram. Yeah. It's a loose series. It's mostly when I have a new microphone to show off. Gotcha. Sometimes I'll feature something that I'm really stoked about. But
don't you have like 100 mics or something?
Around 100, yeah. I've got about 14 more either coming back from repair or coming from Japan or
sure.
or wherever. Yeah, so I really like Iowa and Toshiba knockoffs of RCAs because when I put them up side by side with the real thing, I'm like, I think the Japanese did it better.
Okay.
Sorry. Those RCAs are good, but man, the Iowa VM17 blows my 77DX out of the water every day.
All right.
So, I've been collecting a whole lot of those. I've got a Toshiba version of a 74B coming soon, and yeah, a couple others. But those are, yeah, if anybody wants to nerd out on mics with me, I am here for it.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, the latest stumper is some weird dynamic Toshiba mic from the 80s, I think, that I've never seen before, and there's no documentation about anywhere. So that's my newest post on ICF Studio on Instagram. So if anybody can figure out where that thing came from, or if there's more than one of them in the world, I'd love to know.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you're gonna, talk about your tracking style and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder, with a mic like that, I mean, it's not necessarily whether it sounds good or bad, right? I mean, or is that the case, or is it just because of the character, or what's the story?
With a mic that's that rare, like that's completely unfindable, it's about having the mic. It kind of doesn't matter what it sounds like.
Right.
Yeah, if I was buying specifically to buy tools, I would not be focused the way I'm focused.
Right.
I really I love vintage mics specifically. Like I'm not out looking for like 40 SM57s or anything like that. It's dull. But an SM56 with a transformer, that's cool. And yeah, those stopped being made in the late 70s, I think. So
I'm not sure I've ever seen one of those.
Eddie Van Halen.
Okay.
Any pictures of him being recorded, they're right there.
Okay.
So yeah, there are some cool mics that are kind of normal but not. But yeah, I find that I rotate through microphones when I'm recording. A lot of times I'll put up a mic that I know I'm going to use, and then I'll put up another mic that's an experiment. So I'll always have a safety.
Right.
But sometimes that experiment mic winds up being the winner, and sometimes it's completely not what you expect. The Alien 8 from Dr. Alien Smith in Australia. I'm not sure if I have that on this recording or the other one. It's intended as a kick mic. It's built around the same principle as the Biodynamic M360, I think it is, maybe 380, which is 2 headphone drivers back to back, and it's a figure 8 dynamic with really huge capsules, and it captures this really cool like giant low end. It replaced my sub kick. I just don't use the sub kick anymore.
Right. Cool.
And I put it on guitar, and I was and for like super driven like Marshall Stack heavy guitar, magic. Cool. It brings out this just massive, aggressive like mid-range and low end, and yeah, that besides something else, I was just like, let me try it out, and it kills. Yeah. So there's pretty much it's all about getting a lot of mics, but also experimenting with them, trying out a mic that you wouldn't normally expect to work well in a situation, putting in some spot where you're like, maybe it'll work there, and sometimes you're like, nope, doesn't. Sure. You just throw the track away, and sometimes you're like, well, I've got to do that forever now. So and yeah, I've had some I try to keep it really fresh when I'm doing my tracking sessions. It gets really easy to be like, okay, I've got my drum set up. I've got the stupid number of mics that I put on a drum kit, and I know it sounds great, so why am I going to mess with it? But at the same time, like, a couple of weeks ago, I had a band in where I was expecting like this sort of bluegrass-ish band to play in the live room and put their drummer in a smaller ISO booth just so I could keep them separate enough that I could mix it. And I put the drummer in the ISO booth, and I put a few mics on him, and ended up moving around like 3 or 4 times, trying to find the right set of mics to make the drums sound the way they sounded in the live room, even though they were in a much smaller, deader room, and ended up landing on pretty much exactly the same things I did in the live room. After running through like 5 different microphone choices and positions for, where the kick and the snare and the center kit mic, which I swear by, all that stuff. Yeah, I kind of had to like be forced to do it differently in order to learn that, like, oh yeah, okay, I made these decisions for a reason, and like I've found like something that really works, but I'm flexible enough to try variations on the theme, just as long as it works for whatever I'm recording.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know. Yeah, I guess that kind of feeds into the whole me getting real into getting sounds that are, as right as they can be in the box, or, as they're coming in.
Right, before you come in, right?
Yeah,
or as you're coming
pre-box, yeah. With drums, a huge part of that is, I guess there's two philosophies on it. One is pick mics you really like, put as few of them as possible up, and try to make sure they're physically in phase, overheads to the snare, kick drum probably isolated from all of that. And just put up like 4 mics and call it done. The other way to do that is the way I do it, which is go stupid, put 4 on everything, and then I use Sound Radix Auto Align, which they just released version 2, which is miles beyond version 1. It is so much better because it does spectral phase alignment, so it'll change the phase depending on where in the spectrum it's interacting with the other mics in the group. And it does it all automatically. You don't have to think about it or spend a bunch of time tweaking anything. You just kind of put it on everything, hit play for 45 seconds, and then let it calculate. And it just makes, it makes my 14 mic drum setup sound like it's perfectly in phase, which most of the time is an improvement over what I recorded, even though I try to get it as clear and punchy and in phase as possible while I'm tracking. It's almost always a noticeable and useful difference. Let me just, for fun here.
I think I've always done phase alignment in post-production anyway, right? I don't know if anybody else does that, but I always would.
You try to get the phase right in, and on the way in, you don't want the kick to sound thin while you're recording it.
Right, sure.
You don't want the snare to sound all like boxy and weird. But like sometimes you just have too many mics up, or there's some weird interaction that's just not working. So you turn down the knee mics or the shoulder mics or whatever extra stuff you have, and you listen to it and you're like, okay, that sounds better, but I really want that energy from those further mics that are creating all of these phase issues.
Sure.
And so then you run a phase alignment on them, and everything comes together.
Yeah.
Here's drums from the slider, which are.
I'm sure they're going to bring it up on the screen here.
Yeah. Let me mute the finished mix version. So yeah, these drums were all. So I brought in a session today that I just turned all the plugins off. The only thing that I have on here is some levels and panning, and it sounds like it sounds like nothing. Let's find out why. Oh, that's why. So that's actually not only dry, that is all mics at exactly the same level.
So you set the pre's and stuff to the volume that you want them to be, kind of thing?
Exactly. Okay. So yeah, as I was tracking it, I just brought everything up to where it should be and where it's feeling good. So I don't have to do any post mixing.
Okay.
It also helps with the headphone mix that the drummer is hearing, because it sounds like what I was aiming for in the control room in their cans. So. And same goes for basically everything. I'm trying to, as I'm tracking, I'm trying to make sure that 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 there's at least some sort of reasonable gain structure where everything's kind of like approximately the right volume for the thing. Yeah, I call myself an egregious overmicer, and this is no exception this session. There is a SE kick, the SE V kick inside, a Tull 47, which is a U47 clone on the outside, a Beta 91 inside, and a sub kick. This is before I got the Alien. That's just the kick mic, or the kick mics, and then snare. There's a condenser, a 57, and 441 on the bottom. Pretty sure. Rack and floor, I was pretty chill about. I think I just dynamics on those hats. I probably used a Biodynamic M500, which is a unidirectional ribbon mic, which I love. Like a really focused ribbon on a hat, because the little that you're going to use it, it's still like kind of tasty sounding, despite being a hat mic. And yeah. So yeah, sometimes, and this one I had knee rides, or knee mics on both sides in front of the kit, which were Coles 4038s, and then let's see what else is on there. M49s overhead, it's pretty sweet. A Shure monophonic ribbon for the center overhead, and then Earthworks back in the corners of the room for some space, which if you absolutely destroy those with like the level lock, double lock, whatever it is, you can get some, the Sound Toys one, you can get some just enormous sounding room out of almost any size room. So you want your drums to sound big and Zeppelin-y, you can just be completely over the top with a real smashy limiter compressor, and it pulls out this big room sound that's really great. Hey, what kind of plugins do you have on this machine, dude?
Not much.
No?
Yeah, I think it's just stock pretty much.
Oh, okay. So wondering
There
if
may
I
be
could,
like a few extra plugins, but not much. It's just
Yeah.
mainly stock.
wondering if I could use something real dirty to. Here, let me ruin it with this. There we go. Yeah. So that's just the room mics. Ruined as they were. So,
Cool.
yeah, it's super easy to expand the size of your room without having to do much of anything with it. But yeah, that's just a little bit about my my approach for drums is.
So you're just using, one set of pre's, Neves, or what? Or do you,
It's
are you
50-50.
using compressors too? Or?
I'm using a little everything. Some things come in pretty uncompressed. Overheads tend to be. I tend to try to leave those kind of mostly alone. I'll touch them. So the two main sets of preamps I have are Neve with 1073s and 1084s, and then a Tree Audio console, which has a sort of an L2 real slow opto limiter on it, on every channel, and then a very, very simple EQ. And so when I'm tracking, some channels will get a little bit of that limiter, and then it's generally the close mics are going through either API or Neve preamps, and the toms, the overheads, the room mics are all going through the Tree, which is a little bit slower and grittier and looser sounding. So I get the punch of the close mics plus that sort of like warm vintage tube preamp sound out of the rest of the mics. That's yeah. Also, I've gone back and forth on what I use where as far as outboard. And I keep coming back to the Dangerous Backs EQ and the Allen Smart C2 for the kick mics, because it's basically an SSL bus and then a really like broad, simplified EQ that gives like just the right amount of push and punch for the kick drums. Distressors or 1176s for snare. And then if I'm smashing up overheads or toms or anything like that, it's usually Fairchild, LA2A. Sometimes I'll get weird and use the Spectrasonics the V610s. Sometimes the toms get these Langevin EQs that I have. Just kind of, a little bit of that depends on the drummer and the sound of the drums and the sound of the song that we're trying to get going. Sometimes I want it to be really uncontrolled and very like let the drummer do their own dynamics, especially if it's a more kind of a delicate song where the drummer knows how to play into the song. Sometimes it'll be like, all right, everything just has to be just blocks because we're going for full aggression here. So, but yeah, I just kind of think of them in terms of, fast compressors, slow compressors, and, what gives me punch if I want punch, what gives me like depth and hold and ring if that's what I want. And some compressors can do a lot of stuff, and some of them, like the Level Devil, like literally have no controls on the front at all. It's just the louder you hit it, the slower it goes, and the more it smashes and distorts, and it sounds good when it does it. Yeah. So, also oftentimes when I'm recording stuff like this, I'm recording guitar, bass, and drums at the same time, or some variation on that theme.
Right.
And this is no exception. This was drums, bass, and a guitar that we ended up replacing with several overdubs from Emily, where that was how the basic tracks went down. So
all these we're hearing right now are just straight up raw tracks
with
pretty much
nothing on them.
levels that came in mostly.
Exactly. And yeah, that's I haven't done any changes other than pulling the volume back a little bit. And then the drums are going through buses that normally would be on, because that, like, to give you an idea of where it lands after it's lived through a bunch of processing. Here's the beginning of the same song post master. So you can hear it's not a long trip from the raw tracks to the mix. A lot of what I was doing was cleaning and tightening and balancing everything so that it all kind of hung together, and then like brightening up the vocals a little bit and adding the occasional funky little transition effect or something like that. But once the basic tracks were done, we spent a fair bit of time doing things like adding some synthesizer stuff. There's some Mellotron hiding in here. Just doing that. There's a bass synth hiding in there that's just a foot pedal synth that I have hanging around at the studio. It's a homebrew that sounds like a Moog Taurus. It's pretty cool. Yeah, there's all these goofy little fun things, but like,
I know she's got an 808 in there in the live one.
oh yeah, that's all here.
Yeah.
It's all, yeah, that was like the trap hats. That was a lot of those were built in.
Yeah.
I was originally going to build it all in Logic and just let it do a bunch of trap stuff and see what I liked out of it. I ended up just taking one hi-hat sample and just copying and pasting it all over the place. You can see how absurd this is. Yeah, it's literally just that. So, and then I just lo-fied that like crazy so it would sound more like it fit with the song. And that was yeah. And then the big drop is just I think it's just a drop sample I had, honestly. Not even sure where I got it from. Probably Splice or something. So yeah, I was just like, kind of grab whatever we can, throw in real synthesizers at it, throw in like bits and pieces of hi-hats at it. It's kind of a, if you've got a hardware version of it, cool, pull it out, see if it does something unique. If you don't, plugins are phenomenal these days. I love plugins. I've got a real DX7. Half the time I use the DX7 from Arturia. I've got real Whirly and clavinet and Rhodes and grand piano and upright piano, and I, depending on how much time I have, plug in. Depending on how good the player is, MIDI sometimes saves our butt. Where getting them to try to play the real thing would not work out. So
yeah.
So yeah, there's it's all that, like, use whatever tools you have at your disposal.
It's one of the nice things about this. You can track piano and MIDI at the same time.
Right, yeah. And then, yeah.
Makes it nice.
You don't need to tune it.
Yeah, exactly.
Just use the MIDI. Yeah, it's as I was saying, it's kind of all about getting it in the mix. You can't really see it in these tracks because a lot of these have been consolidated. I'm trying to think how much comping I did. I usually do a lot of comping to try to avoid having to tune as much as possible, unless I'm using it as an effect. Tuning, it's like, even a little bit of tuning can really take away from the feel of the naturalness of the song, or how much you connect with it as a human, because it feels like a human song. And yeah, if every note is absolutely perfect and there's no weirdness in there, no humanity in there, then it's just not going to connect. So yeah, where did that drop go? That's weird. You mentioned it and now I'm like completely at a loss as to where it is. Oh, it's up here. Okay. This little guy. I reversed it too.
Yeah. Cool.
Just to, when they use that sample on stage, for some reason, every sound person I've seen them mix them live needs to have the sample pad up at like unity volume, and like it just ruins the entire club. It's like every single time I'm like, that's maybe you should turn that down in the pad a little bit. Like it's like all the other stuff kind of comes through and blends with the song, and they hit that sub drop, and it's just like you can feel you can see the front of house person just like grabbing their faders, like, oh, just melted my 18s. So yeah, this is this was a really fun production to do. We did it almost all in one day. And that's kind of the other thing that I love about the workflow that I have when I'm working with bands, where I'm not trying to write the song, where they're coming in with it ready to go, and all I'm doing is adding like weird ideas, like the synth stuff or the drops, or any of that stuff. Emily actually came in with the idea to put trap hats on it, and we
Okay.
figured out how to make that work. But yeah, there's a spot in the vocal where you can hear this like sound, and it sounds like it was a sample of something or other. I just gave her a bowl full of percussion. It's a hubcap full of percussion. She just set it on the floor, and as she was singing, she'd just kick it every now and then. And I think it comes out in the intro to the solo.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. That's just her. And then she said, "Sure," and we tuned it down 2 octaves. It's yeah. Just
Cool.
just like that. Yeah. But yeah, that was all like. Once we got the basic tracks down, we spent a bunch of time getting the guitars set up. I think they're all stereo recordings of the guitars with 2 amps going, split left and right, with a ribbon and a dynamic on both guitars. And once again. She uses a lot of pedals. So yeah, we got a lot of cool sounds, and then I just had to kind of shine them up and get them to stick together. And yeah, they pull it off live as well. Like it sounds pretty much the same. Except that the sub is usually blowing up the...
Yeah, did you listen to the live version of it that
I did.
James put together?
Yeah, that sounded great.
Yeah.
I got to see her on a tour kickoff at Antone's too, and that was one of the spots where, yeah, it was, super talented, like super consistent.
Yeah.
She writes for her range, or
Yeah,
chooses
sure.
covers for her range. So that's one of the biggest things is like, she's not trying to do something she's not. She's not trying to like push her vocals outside of like a comfortable area. Right. And it really makes like a huge difference. Like she can consistently give a performance every day that sounds like her.
Yeah.
And sounds great. So yeah, that's pretty much that. Does anybody have any questions about the recording process or?
I have a question, but it's not about the recording process.
Hit me.
My question is, what advice can you give to students that want to own their own recording studio?
Do you have any other financial plans in your life? Because if you want to own and live in your own recording studio, which is what I did for a lot of years, you can. The trick is that you probably have to live there too, and I think that it's really easy to get bogged down in. I think this is something that recording engineers do, that guitarists do, that bassists do, that drummers do, is you get really caught up in the gear and like getting the next thing that's going to make your sound better. And with the exception of some real basic things that you kind of have to get really great recordings, all the other stuff is for fun. Like, I'm absolutely a microphone enthusiast. There is nothing about my collection that is making me any real money. Like, it's, there are some people that come for some of the gear, but generally the microphones, they're like, yeah, that's nice that you have those. Okay. So I guess the advice really is like, well, 2 things. One, make as many friends and connections as you can. Be as open to as many genres as you can. And try to really know and understand those genres and and know how you can work in them in a way that's like unique to you. Because owning your own studio is kind of like any other small business. You get a set of gear for a certain amount of money, you try to find clients and you record them. But succeeding with that, I think, is finding your voice as a engineer, producer, co-writer, whatever it is you're doing, and really showing that you have something to offer, that, because like literally everyone has everything they need for a home studio to make a great sounding album. Like if you've got a 2-channel interface, one halfway decent mic, a bunch of plugins and a laptop, you're gold. You can do almost everything unless you want to record live drums, and then you have to get a bunch more microphones and a bigger interface. But knowing how to use it and knowing how to work with artists and be someone who, is, if you're not becoming friends with the people you're working with at some level or another, you're probably not in the right line of work, because it's all relationships, and ideally it's all friendships. You should be able to get done with something and look, like you and the artist sit back and look at it and go like, we made this and we're really proud of it, and it sounds, better than we'd ever hoped. Let's put it out, and then follow that up by doing the same thing the next day. It's one, focus, make a list of things that you have to work, and then 2, set yourself apart by being you, because every musician, every artist, every person has something that is unique to them, and figuring out what that is, tapping into it, and making it you is is the whole job. So that's what I got.
Nice.
Yeah. Anyone else?
How did you get comfortable working with different genres?
I'm still not comfortable working with some genres, so I'm just winging it. A lot of it is listening, trying to hear what's new, what's happening right now, what's happening next. But for me, my understanding of genres was, largely because I'm a musician as well, was the kind of music that I was around. And I started out in like a hair metal band when I was 17, and then moved on to like the grunge scene was happening at the time, and I was in a few bands like that. And then I joined like a hip hop industrial crossover band in Chicago, and in every one of those cases, I was just sort of throwing myself in there like, is this something that sounds cool? Try it. And like learning as I went, and the other people that I was in the band with that knew more about the genre that I was playing with were able to kind of show me their process and what they were into, and what sounded good to them. And at the end of it all, like if you know the foundation of the music that you're working on, whether it's something like really drum and bass based, or something guitars and keyboards and vocals based, or whatever it is, and you can find some way to spin it so that it's yours again. That's kind of the if it basically you try that, and if you like what you hear, then you've succeeded. And if you don't like what you hear, then you keep working on it. And if other people like what you hear, then yay. And if they don't, then there's always going to be haters. But if if it really lights something up in you, keep going. I guess the other thing is just listening a lot to a lot of different kinds of music, and so being raised in the 90s, in the 80s in the Midwest, there was a whole lot of people that I was around at that time that were like, yeah, I like most kinds of music except country and rap. And I was like, well, that just cuts out like 60% of the music in the world. Cool, you know, like, and I never thought that that was anything more than just kind of being super close-minded about, you know, like it's like so many, I don't know how many times I heard, you know, I just don't like country rap. Everything else is great. And what they really meant is they just like classic rock and Budweiser. I don't know. And so, yeah, I wasn't exposed to a lot of country or bluegrass or like any kind of hip hop except for Run DMC because they were huge. And so I kind of had to self-expose to all that stuff. And then when I moved to Chicago, I had a lot more like industrial music and hip hop and you know, stuff like that happening there that I was directly exposed to as part of the music scene. But also like you heard, you know, Tejano music blasting out of vans driving down the street in one part of town, and you know like you heard all sorts of, you know, cumbias or whatever going on in another part of town. And so there was all this music happening around me that I was like, I've never heard this, and I really want to know, you know, what this is about. I got super into salsa music for a while. I got super into reggae for a while. I was like, I just wanted to listen to as much as I could of a bunch of different things and figure out, you know, what made it tick. And that's easier now than it ever was because, for one thing, there's streaming services, which didn't exist at the time, but also YouTube and like behind the music kind of things like Song Exploder and like all these really cool ways to find out what the artist was actually thinking. And tons of documentaries have come out. Yeah, there's so many good resources for learning, like, you know, like what the process is behind every genre. So, yeah, thanks for the question.
I have, oh wait, what you got, Doug?
What are you most proud of in your music career?
In my music career, it's tough. I've had the good fortune to work on some really cool records with some really great people, and but I think the one that was both probably the biggest struggle, but at the end of it, I felt like I had really created a true piece of art. And maybe the first time that I felt that proud about something was Quiet Company's album, We Are All Where We Belong. It took me, it took us about a year to make that album. And it was a lot of like nights and weekends while we were doing day job stuff or touring or whatever. And it's like 15 songs. It's on 2 discs on vinyl. It's enormous. And we got Tim Palmer to mix it, who's been a guest here more than once.
Yeah.
And so it was really cool to get to work with him and to hear what he did to my tracks to make them a mix was like the best masterclass in mixing you could ever have, because I knew exactly what went into every single track on that album because I'd spent a year putting it together. And when he took it and was just like, oh yeah, this isn't jazz or classical. Like we can be like totally brutal with the sounds as long as they come out sounding the way I want them to sound. That was like a total revelation to me because I'd always been very like cautious of the original intent and trying to like, you know, like gently shape things so that they all fit together nicely. And he was just like, hey, just cut everything below that. Yeah, push that up. Kill 300 hertz. Do that. You know, he's just like,
Yeah.
He's like, it doesn't matter. You know, just make it sound great. You know, that the end goal is the only goal.
What was the record called again?
It's We Are All Where We Belong by Quiet Company. Yeah, so that one's probably my proudest achievement as an artistic whole because I was part of the writing process. I played bass and keys on it and recorded every bit of it in a 12-foot by 12-foot ISO booth in an apartment. So, once again, do anything anywhere. And yeah, since then I've done mixes and recordings that I'm like, I feel like I've done better with than what we did with what we had then. But that one still kind of stands out as just like, really rewarding result from a ton of effort. So, and it still stands up. I listen to it and I'm still very proud of it. So.
Is there anything with the awards that you've won that you like, or are they just random things that you? I'm just curious.
Yeah, no, thank you. The Emmy was for a series called Notes in Time, and I've really had a lot of fun working with. It's a group of camera people from ATXN, which is like the City of Austin network, that kind of proposed this and spearheaded it, and submitted it for the regional Emmys, which is how I won that. Super fun. It wasn't, as engineering goes, the one that won the Emmy wasn't a huge challenge because Carrie Rodriguez is an amazing performer, and Luke, her husband, partner, whatever he is also fantastic. But yeah, I just put up some mics and recorded it, and it was gorgeous going in.
Yeah.
So that's the dirty secret to becoming a great producer is working with great musicians, so you don't have to work so hard, or at all almost. But yeah, I mean, it was a really cool experience. And in fact, after a long pandemic hiatus, it looks like Notes in Time is going to be coming back. I just got an email about that yesterday.
Okay.
So I'm pretty excited to get some more great artists in there. And yeah, that whole series allowed me to work with people like Marsha Ball,
Right.
and blanking. Leonard Cohen's bass player, Roscoe Beck.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so Darden Smith came in, Roscoe Beck came in. I got to play his bass, his uprights. Fabulous. So yeah, I mean, it was really, really cool to win an Emmy, but sometimes some of those awards are like, just do the thing in the industry, put it in the right place, and the award comes. Yay. So, it's just like, work at a professional level. You do it long enough, a connection happens, somebody's doing something that's like, connected to that, but in a different space. You know what you're doing, you do it well. Everybody else knows what they're doing, they do it well. It all comes together and you get an award-winning product out of it. So yeah, Danny Rice just won like a bunch of awards for the Green Knight because he's been being a professional recording engineer and producer and songwriter for a lot of years. And so, that led to him getting on, I think he's on the Elementals soundtrack, new Disney movie. So some huge things come out of just doing it. Austin, the Austin Music Awards producer award was actually for We're All Where We Belong for that album. And that was a huge honor. I got to meet Robert Plant while I was there, so that was neat. But yeah, I mean, the awards are strange. Like, I feel like you just do really good work for a really long time, and every now and then somebody looks at you and goes, yeah, you did good work. Here's an award for that. Thanks. I'm going to keep doing good work.
Cool.
Yeah.
I have one more question, unless somebody else has one they want to jump in on. So earlier you said, you become friends with everybody you work with, right? I mean, obviously, yeah, right.
Yeah.
If you're doing records or you're spending any significant time with people, you just, you're going to end up hanging out, becoming friends. So how do you separate friends from business, or is that a problem for you at all?
It's less of a problem as I've gotten older and more established.
Right.
The hardest thing to separate is like, you're in a band, you're recording your band. How do you like bill your band?
Yeah.
That's the toughest one, and I've never 100% gotten that right. But I feel like it's establishing a clear boundary of like, hey, this is in that situation, like, this is my business. I have to make a certain amount of money doing my business in order to continue doing my business. You're getting the family deal, but Like I can't do this for nothing.
Right.
And so
Even the bands you're in, right? So I mean, that's
yeah,
important to
it's
know.
you got to be. I mean, you only get so much time in one life, and you have to be a little careful about how you spend it, or else if you're good at what you do and a lot of people want you to do it, they're probably going to do as much asking as they can, and you have to sometimes ask back in order to make it possible for you to have time that's not in the studio. And work-life balance is tough. I'm still trying to get that right, and I've been trying to get that right for a decade now, and I'm still working like often 7 days a week. So, but yeah, with bands that I've worked with, one of the reasons that we become friends is because they respect me as a producer, as an engineer, and they appreciate that I have collected and maintained all this amazing vintage gear for them to use for recording, and that I'm going to make them sound great. So that they respect that comes at a price, and like I will work with people if they have a specific budget and they have a certain amount of work they want to get done, but generally the people that I work with that become good friends are people that are like, hey, you respect me as an artist and you treat my music well, and I respect you as a producer and engineer and studio owner, and I pay you for doing what you do well. So it's generally not spoken, but it's understood that that's kind of the relationship, and it can still be a friendship, despite the fact that it is a professional relationship.
Yeah, some of my closest friends, people I've done many records, I mean, they're closest friends.
Yeah, absolutely.
But,
you find out that we're all more similar than we are different.
Yeah.
Everybody pretty much wants the same stuff, and in an artistic expression format, that's just making something that makes the people that you look up to look at you and go, that's cool. I like that. Yeah.
Cool. Well, let's. So, any other questions, you guys? Yeah.
What advice can you give to students about if you face failure, if you get stuck at an obstacle, or if you get frustrated? What advice can you give us?
If you're hitting a wall with something and you really can't see a way around that wall, the first thing I would do is check with somebody else that is maybe a little further along, and see if they see if they've run across the same problem and can help you past that. If it's the sort of failure where you're like, I realized that I really needed like 6 hours to do this and I only have 2, and it's due immediately, then that's one of those, probably just an object lesson. Like you have to learn that sometimes you're going to not do it right. Failure is fine as long as it's a lesson. If you're repeatedly failing, then probably you need to step back and look at why that is. But yeah, I mean, if you're just running up against frustration and obstacles and stuff like that, like there's a huge community of people that love to talk about, especially in like in engineering and in the minutia of mixing and recording, myself included. If we're posed an interesting question, happy to just like throw 4 paragraphs of response at it. There are still forums for that sort of thing. I think it used to be called Gear Sluts, but they changed it to something less uncouth. I forget what it's called now. But anybody remember?
Well, that's not good, right? Because Gear Sluts, but
Yeah.
I don't remember.
Yeah.
I don't know what it's called.
Gear something. Anyway, do you know what it is? Oh, yeah. Well, yeah, Reddit's strong. Some of these old school forums that have been around for 20 years have like people like Andrew Sheps posting on them regularly. Like you can get some like serious advice from some like heavy hitting Grammy winners. It's But yeah, I mean, probably true of Reddit as well. I would say understanding the level of question you're asking and where you should be asking that question. Like if it's if it's like a group that's like all like super seasoned engineers that that are dealing with like really esoteric issues, you're probably not going to want to ask them about like like really basic newbie level stuff. But there are plenty of people out there that are that are like a couple of years down the road on the same path, that are falling in love with the process of recording and engineering and producing, that can answer your questions. And ideally that helps you also build a community, because it's really easy to not have a community when you're a studio owner, because all the other studio owners, who are people that you would totally get along with on a personal level, are also your competition. So like you love them, you all have the same kind of like idea and focus and desire to do like really great work in the same area. And if you put them all in, put all of us in a room and get us to talking about something, we'll talk for days. But there's still competition, and you're both ideally working so much that you don't have any time to hang out. So, the more connections you can build like that, where you can actually build friendships with other engineers and not see it as competition so much as like part of, a sort of a loose community, a union, if there was a union for us. That'd be nice. It's again, it's making connections, making friends. You never know when somebody's going to be like, hey, I got this artist that came in, and I've done this with a friend of mine who was a few years behind me in engineering. I had an artist come in who really wants a producer who can take the time with him to develop his songs, and I'm not super into what he's doing, but it seems like it's right up your alley, so here you go. And he wound up producing 2 full albums with a guy, and they're good friends now, and that worked out perfectly. That's the sort of thing that can happen when you've admitted failure and asked questions.
Yeah.
So
I would always tell you too to finish the project as the best you can, let it go and move on to the next one, right? You're going to grow from moving from project to project, right? Don't get too stuck. I've seen people like remix something, rework something for a lifetime, and that's the worst thing you could ever do.
Yeah, it never gets better.
Yeah, no.
It just gets more worked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So just do your best on it and move on.
Yeah.
You got some?
Yeah, the drum phase software that you mentioned, or the
Yeah.
software, what was it?
Yeah. Auto Align. Yeah, by Soundradix with an X.
It's become more sophisticated over time. It's pretty interesting how it works.
The original Auto Align was like, it would do polarity reversal, and it would do a sample movement where you'd have your source mic, and then you'd have your second mic that's supposed to be aligned to the source mic, and it would move it however many samples so that it would line up, and then decide whether or not it was, the polarity was correct at that point, or whether it needed to be flipped over. And it worked pretty well, but Auto Align 2 is all spectral analysis, spectral phase, and it's magic. I've gotten like clearer, bigger, meatier sounding drums faster than I've ever gotten them before. And yeah, that one just dropped like 2 months ago, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been on every single project since then.
Cool.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, you're welcome.
Do we have another question back there? Or was Cool.
Ryan, what's the best kick pedal?
the best?
I like the 5000, the DW 5000.
Yeah, it's bread and butter. It's
Yeah, it's
solid.
It's not too smooth like the 9000.
Yeah.
It's just right.
Right on. Thanks. I have one of those. I'm glad.
That was Ryan at the back of the room. He takes care of everybody in a million ways. So
Yeah,
drummer extraordinaire.
plays a good drum. Yeah.
Well, cool, man. Well, so I'm going to ask one last question.
Hit me.
And, I always, kind of throw this in there to try and get it going. But imagine you were 18 again, right? a young 18, and
Mhm.
you were trying to get into this. I mean, what would be your, obviously, you're just getting started, but now you have the experience that you have now. What would you tell that person? What's the best advice you would give that person?
Man. God, that's tough. Do everything you can to focus on music and rhythm theory.
Rhythm theory.
Yeah, learn music theory with an emphasis on rhythm. Take drum lessons. Learn arrangement. So much of the work I do is figuring out how the arrangement works. And when I was, as a piano player primarily, I always approached music like this big washy linear thing that didn't have sections, or like like I didn't big picture a song. It was always just sort of like I start here and I wind up over here. And I think that the thing that would have helped me become a better producer a lot faster is learning drums and learning more kind of like structure theory and that kind of music theory. Because like drummers look at a song in terms of like arrangement and dynamics.
Dynamics, yeah.
They look at it in sections, and it's very big picture. It's like, all right, we're starting here, we're going here. On the way, we're doing this, then we're coming back to this, then we're going there, we're coming back to this. We're bringing it up, we're bringing it down. That big picture dynamics, like mindset, is what I think makes a great producer.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
As much as like finding the emotion in the song, or finding a great hook, like just being able to step back and look at the whole song and be like, all right, if I take this part and put it here, take this part and put it here, give this, like a different level of dynamic because it's going to work better. Stuff that I learned over the course of 20 years of making mistakes and failing and succeeding sometimes, but generally just like, trying stuff and seeing if it worked is stuff that I probably could have learned all at once if I had known to focus hard on, learning the big picture. And, if you don't have, if you don't have like an instrument that you're really comfortable with, I feel like drums is a great place to start, because if you've got a really, really solid pocket groove for whatever kind of music you're playing, or whatever kind of music you're working on, like it's probably the hardest thing to come by is like a really great drummer, or at least a good enough drummer to feel really good for the song that you're working on. And that applies even if you're doing mostly programmed music. The programming goes a whole lot faster if you're good enough at drums to get yourself a little MIDI kit and play the beat that's in your head, rather than trying to tap it out or put it in with dots on a screen. So I think that thinking like a drummer, thinking big picture, helps you think more like a producer, and understanding how the instruments fit together, which is sort of music theory, sort of like, study orchestral arrangements and see how the different instruments fit together in different octaves. Learn about creating space or leaving space. There's a lot. There's a lot to learn, but like, just I think focusing on that learning is probably the biggest part of it. The other thing that I would tell people is just like, try to make friends with the most talented people you can find in your town.
That's big.
Yeah, and go out and it's a whole lot easier here than it was where I grew up to go out and see shows, because there were one a month where I was.
Right.
Whereas here you're spoiled for choice. There's 3 a day. Go out and see shows. catch bands that you think you might like, catch bands that are friends with bands that you like, whatever, wherever they are, whoever they are. You see something you really are blown away by. First time I saw Slow Mo Drags, I was like, I've got to do an album with those guys.
Cool.
And I got them in the studio and we did an album.
Nice.
And it was because I came up to them afterwards and I was just like, man, you guys just destroyed it on stage and I want to capture that. So,
Yeah.
we went in and did a whole album and it came out great. And now the bass player is also an engineer and he's super talented and he's been recording everything since then. So I didn't get to do any more work with them, but it was super fun. And he's been working with Walker Lukens mostly.
Okay.
But yeah, make friends with the talented people that you see, and if you see a band that you super want to work with, like, figure out a way to make it happen. If it isn't in their budget, and you've got a little bandwidth, you can do it. You can do it with time and borrowed gear or whatever. Like, just like a really enthusiastic person who cares enough to learn about how to be, enough of an engineer to trust their ears. Is probably going to do a better job for a band than somebody that's indifferent and just looking for their next paycheck, regardless of the gear. I've heard amazing albums made on crap, and I've heard terrible albums made on stunning gear. So, it's all whoever's driving.
Yeah. Well, cool, man. Well, thank you so much.
Oh,
Appreciate
thanks for having me.
All right, man. Well, thank you guys out there, and we'll catch you guys on the flip side.
All right.
Yes. All right. I think they're going to run the outro.